All right, everyone. Thank you and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for this information session on the Accelerator for Community Colleges in the Innovation Economy Work-Based Learning Capacity Building Cohort. As you probably heard, we are going to be recording this session, and we will send out the recording to all of the registrants, plus it will live on New America's webpage through a blog, and they will be sending that out afterwards as well. So you will get the recording in multiple formats and multiple locations. So we'll go ahead and get started. And so thank you again for joining us. Basically, what we want to cover today is go over the entire project. We want to talk about how to participate in the project. We want to actually walk you through the applications and be able to answer questions. And then we will open it up at the end for all the questions that you may have. But what I would also encourage you to do is throughout the presentation, if you have questions that come up, don't wait until the end. Feel free to put them in the chat. And we can go ahead and either answer them along the way, depending on who's speaking, or we can address them during the Q&A session. So let's see who's here today. So I just want to say, we just want to introduce our teams. Go ahead, next slide, Shaylin. And so we'll start with the ACCT team, and then we'll turn it over to then I'll introduce the New America folks. So this is a partnership between New America and the Association of Community College Trustees. My name is Steve Jurch. I lead the Center for Policy and Practice here at ACCT, and we're joined by Erin Baldwin on our team. She's the Senior Project Associate at the center. And then from the New America side, we have Shailen Jyotishi. He is the founder and managing director of FOE, which is the Future of Workforce in the Innovation Economy at New America. We have Joyce Wong joining us. She is a technical assistance manager in FOE, and Tiffany Tai is our policy analyst from the New America team. So you will hear from one or all of us at multiple times throughout the project. You can reach out to us with questions that you might have once this session is over. So now we're going to go ahead and get started by talking about the project overview and participation. And again, don't wait until the end. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat. We will be monitoring it. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do is, we know that employers are asking for experience when trying to hire our graduates from our community colleges. And we know that community colleges are already working with employer partners to create these innovative work-based learning opportunities for students that meet industry needs. Now, what we are trying to accomplish with this project is we want to make sure that colleges have the best infrastructure in place to maximize these opportunities. And so the goal is to assess current opportunities and quality of work-based learning at your institutions, and then figure out what can we do to improve that capacity at institutions. So what we're doing is we're launching a national cohort of 6 community colleges. At those colleges, we are going to ask that each institution forms a cross-functional team. We'll talk a little bit more about that team makeup later. And then we are going to ask that you implement, we are going to create, but we want you to launch a comprehensive self-study to assess the current opportunities and quality of your work-based learning at the institution. And then what we're going to do is, based on those insights that we gather, develop a strategic plan. We're going to actually ask you to develop that strategic plan for work-based learning capacity building. Now, the participation timeframe for this project is June 2026 through December 2027, with optional opportunities to follow. Next slide, please. And well, before we go to the next slide, Shaylin, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Was that comprehensive enough?
I think you covered it.
Perfect, thanks. And feel free to chime in if I'm missing something. I know you're going to speak later, but I just want to give you that opportunity. The cohort of 6 institutions, there's a couple of things that they're going to receive. One is funding, right? We want to provide $20,000 stipends to the participating institutions. Those will occur in two installments. We are going to provide technical assistance and peer learning opportunities for the cohort, and then access to subject matter experts. So when we send along the institutional self-study instrument, we want to provide support for deploying that self-study tool within the institution. And again, it's to help improve institutional approaches to scale work-based learning. So what we're really trying to do is identify ways to improve those approaches and then scale them at your institutions. There's also a dissemination piece that the cohort will participate in. So as part of this project, there's going to be multiple national communications that go out from our organizations, conference sessions, different things like that. And so as pilot partners in this project, you will receive recognition once that self-study tool is published. And then we also are going to offer the opportunity to engage in other dissemination activities and share and have the opportunity for you to share lessons learned across the sector. All right, so here's the important part. When are things due and what am I supposed to remember? So the application release date, you may have received notification of that was on March 30th. Today is the informational meeting for the applicants. Application submission deadline. Okay, so here's the very important date, which is May 8th of 2026. Finalist interview period would be late May of 2026. The institutional selection and onboarding is going to be in June of 2026. And then the project participation, we said it launches in June and it goes through December of 2027. Okay, so selection criteria. You might be asking like, okay, what are you guys looking for in this application? I think there's three main areas. One is a demonstrated presidential and board level commitment to improving and scaling work-based learning at your institutions. And so we just want to make sure that there's leadership buy-in, right? And that could come in a variety of different ways. It could be you have a current working definition of work-based learning at your institution. Have you built it into your strategic plan or any initiatives that you've launched at your institution that can demonstrate this commitment? Or have you participated in prior initiatives that are focused on work-based learning? Another thing that we're looking for is we want to make sure that, right, we're talking about work-based learning, so we want to make sure that the employers are engaged. So we want you to show that you have a network of employer and or regional industry partners that would support you in this endeavor. And so that can be letters of support, sharing their, participation and partnership with your institution in an initiative like this. That could be regional chamber organizations, that could be industry associations, that could be your normal employer network that you have. And then we want to make sure that you have the ability to complete the self-study and implement it, which means we want you to make sure that you have sufficient capacity at the institution. So what we are asking for, I mentioned this very briefly earlier, is what does that cross-functional team look like? We're looking for 4 to 6 members, and we're looking for senior leadership. That could be the president, chancellor, or a presidential designee, so one of the cabinet or senior leadership at the institution. We also are asking for 2 full-time administrative staff, preferably someone that functions as a chief workforce officer. That could be a VP position, it could be an associate VP position, or a dean, depending on the way your institution is structured, but someone who deals with workforce, and then someone who deals with work-based learning, right? They could be in similar areas. A lot of crossover we know happens at community colleges, but essentially we want to identify individuals that cover those 2 areas. We would like 2 faculty members to be part of this team. And then you can have a variety of other members. It could be students, it could be trustees, it could be foundation staff, depending on what your institution looks like. Next slide, please. Okay, so participation requirements. So when what does participation look like? So deploy the provided institutional self-study tool. So what is the time frame for these activities to occur once you're selected? We're anticipating that deploying the institutional self-study tool is going to take around 6 or 7 months. And the idea is to assess and inventory current approaches, right? And the goal is we want to be able to help you identify strengths and areas for growth on your campuses. We want you to develop a strategic plan for capacity building. Okay. And this is not going to go just in a vacuum, right? You're going to receive technical assistance around this and supports. So we want you to come up with at least 5 policy and or practice changes throughout a 1 to 5 year period, right? You don't have to implement them within the first year, 5 institutional policies or practice changes, but basically we want you to have a long-term plan. What we do ask is that over the next 8 to 9 months of the project, that you implement at least 1 policy or practice change by the end of the project, right? So once you've identified what those challenges are, where some areas for growth are, you've developed your strategic plan to enact or to come up with 5 policy or practice changes that you would love to implement. Then we want you to create a strategic plan for that work-based learning capacity building. And that is just the implementation would just be one of those 5. And then throughout this process, we mentioned you're going to be participating in technical assistance support. So that is ongoing, individual coaching, virtual workshops. And then we are going to ask, and this is optional, but we would love for you to share your insights and lessons learned through some of those dissemination activities that we will be sharing.
Hey, Steve, could I add something on this one?
You absolutely can.
So one thing, just to give you all a sense, the institutional self-study tool, New America and ACCT are developing as we speak. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of what this will look like, it'll essentially be a survey instrument that you could deploy to your on-campus and off-campus stakeholders. And we'll talk through what those stakeholders look like later on. Also accompanied with the self-study tool will be some interview protocols that we've developed based on, the research our organizations have done, past technical assistant projects, and just sort of following the work-based learning space more broadly. So, the self-study tool you can expect from New America ACCT will include those 2 components. There'll be sort of a qualitative, interview-based component, and then a survey component. And it will be up to the cohort to decide how to customize it and tailor it to suit the needs of your institution. But that'll be sort of the baseline that we'll be providing to the cohort. And one thing that I'd also say is at the end of this project, we're actually planning on publishing that self-study tool for the benefit of any community college. So in many ways, this cohort of 6 are our pilot partners, our pressure testers, and we're going to be sort of refining it over the course of the project as well. And we think that's an exciting opportunity to not only sort of strengthen the institutional infrastructure at your own college for work-based learning, but also contribute to something the field could use more broadly, sector-wide. So I just thought I'd voice over a little bit about what we're thinking by way of that self-study tool. Yeah, back to you, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Thank you for doing that. And I think next, yeah. And so before I turn it over to our New America partners to talk through some of the application and participation components, I just want to address like what is the $20,000 supposed to be used for, right? And so primarily it's intended to help staff with staff bandwidth to deploy the self-study, develop and implement the strategic plan, and participate in the technical assistance. So in essence, participate in the project. And so some allowable uses include, staffing for self-study deployment, costs associated with convening partners and stakeholders, expenses associated with any data collection, management, research, evaluation activities, travel to meetings, conferences, or events related to this, and, technical assistance engagements with New America and ACCT or other subject matter experts. Basically, and I would like to point out that part of the application requires, and Shaylin will talk through this, a budget submission on use of that funding. And just so you know, we're not basing acceptance into the cohort on how you use that funding. Obviously, it has to be used for the project, but we're not looking for a specific way to use that funding. Um, so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that we're not expecting you to use it in any particular way, but here are some good examples. So with that, I will turn it over to Shaylin to talk about actually how to participate.
Thanks very much, Steve, and thanks very much to all of you for joining. As Steve mentioned, my name is Shaylin Jyotishi. I head up our Future of Work and Innovation Economy initiative at New America, and we're just really excited to deepen our partnership with ACCT and hopefully work with some of you over the next couple of years ahead. So now we'll take some time to talk through the components of the application. And what you'll see here is a little bit of an overview. And what we'll do is walk through the actual application itself and just voice over some considerations that we're thinking of by way of the cohort structure. So here are the four components. The first section is pretty self-explanatory. As Steve mentioned, we'll be asking for the team members to evaluate the staff capacity that's available at the institution for the self-study itself. The second section is really the core of the application, where we have 7 areas, 7 questions that we're using to evaluate candidates for the cohort. And we'll talk through that in more detail once we shift over to the application itself. The third section of the application are sort of your financial information and other details, and that's really in place to help expedite the grant awarding once you're selected into the cohort. So there'll be a section for the letter of support from your industry partner or your chamber or your economic development organization, whoever you identify that could vouch for that industry's skin in the game and the work-based learning aspirations of your institution. There'll be a section for the grant budget and a grant narrative, as Steve mentioned. This is really high level. It's not anything like a federal grant. It's not anything like a more intensive state application. It's just a simple template for us to get a little bit of a sense of what you aim to use grant funding for. And then there'll be some details to actually issue the grant to your institution once you're selected in the cohort. And finally, we will conduct a round of finalist interviews for this cohort. So there'll be some time options available in the application form. So again, we can just expedite that process on our end here. So with that, I'm going to stop the screen share here and shift over to our application itself. And my colleague Joyce Wong and I will walk through sections 1 and 2 and 2 and 4 respectively, and then we'll break for questions. So let me bring the screen share back. And you all should see that now. Can I get some thumbs up or chat reactions? Okay, great. So this is now visible. So this Google Doc that you see here is accessible through the application launch blog that Steve mentioned. We'll send this out in the follow-up communication, but the project team you see here published this for the New America website last Monday. And really, it captures everything you need to know about the application process. It includes a link to the application itself, and it includes a link to this Google Doc version of the application that you can use to prepare your application offline. And it will include the YouTube recording that we have that will result from this webinar once we wrap here. So this is the application. Again, the timeline that Steve went over is included right here for you. The deadline is here. The application itself will be submitted using SurveyMonkey Apply, and the link is there for you. The selection criteria Steve already went through. We're really looking for institutional level buy-in at its core. This is a institutional capacity building project. You may have a part of your college that has more experience with work-based learning than others. But what we're looking for in the applications is an institution that's really committed to work-based learning capacity building, as opposed to, just, the healthcare college or the business school or what have you. The employer partners, and then also the staff capacity and sort of the commitment to implement the self-study and the implementation work that will follow it thereafter. So here are the brass tacks, right? So the first section is the application overview, and college details are pretty stock, pretty self-explanatory. The area where you identify your application primary contact is one that we'll should spend a little bit of time on. So many of you may be from the grant writing team, many of you may enlist the grant writing team. That's perfectly fine. But we would encourage you all to consider the application for the cohort less so of a grant application and more so of a capacity building opportunity. So we would encourage you to have the primary contact for your application be one of the point people for work-based learning or workforce development at the institution, so that that person is able to help ensure that what's in this application aligns with here. That institutional level commitment to work-based learning, the network of regional employers, and the institutional capacity to participate in the project. Um, the next set of information are just the financial contact details so that we know who to email when it comes to issuing your award. And then there's a section of the required team members. Again, you have your executive leadership, as Steve mentioned, president, chancellor, or it could be a designee. You have the full-time staff. These full-time staff could also be the primary contact. That's fine. But we're looking for at least someone who has that institutional level purview or responsibility for workforce development, and then someone who is also heading up work-based learning in particular at the institution. I know many of you are in those roles on the line today. We are looking for some level of faculty leadership at the institution, faculty buy-in and excitement for work-based learning. So there'll be spaces for faculty partners to be identified. And then there'll be spaces for other team members, up to 6 additional team members. And you might include trustees, you might include student trustees, you might include alumni reps, maybe those who've graduated from your work-based learning programs. You might want to engage your IR staff, who might have some data resources or data insights that could feed into your self-study. You might want to engage staff from across the institution, ranging from career services or different program or center directors, and then certainly the dean level leadership as well. So this will be a section for you to identify sort of who will lead this initiative on behalf of your institution. And as I mentioned, section 2 is really where the details come into play. We first start off by asking colleges to give us your working definition for work-based learning. It's okay if it's a starting point, but we'd like to get a sense of where the starting point is for applicants. So in addition to describing the definition itself, we'd love for you to describe how the definition came about. And for all of these questions, you'll see that the max word count limit is 500 words. If you can get this across in 200 words, that's fine. We're not evaluating for hitting that 500 word count. We're evaluating the response. Then there's the question around the employers, getting a sense of who your largest employers for work-based learning might be or are, and then what your labor market looks like. What is the regional economy that the college is aiming to use work-based learning to respond to? There'll be the question about work-based learning as an institutional priority for question 3. So again, does this show up in your strategic plans, maybe a large grant deliverable, maybe a new state requirement or initiative that's driving the college's interest in work-based learning, capacity building, or maybe you've participated in something like this before. That's great. That's perfectly fine, and we'd love to know about it so we can build on momentum that's already underway. The fourth question will be around staff capacity. So again, describing how your proposed project team has the right degree of, institutional tenure. Are folks familiar with the general state of play of workforce development and work-based learning at the institution? Has the president and executive leadership sort of empowered them with the right level of authority to act at the institutional level? And is there just that commitment to work-based learning, capacity building? We know there's lots of workforce priorities at institutions, from career and technical education to workforce Pell implementation to all in between. So we're looking for a sense of that commitment to work-based learning for this cohort. And then there's the question about the self-study itself. Again, when we say self-study, there's really two components involved with the self-study. There's the on-campus stakeholders, so asking your students, your faculty, your staff, your leadership, what they think is working well and what are some areas of growth and improvement. And our survey instrument will give you a framework for asking those questions, which you can then customize as you see fit. And then there's the off-campus stakeholders, your employers and industry associations, your state leaders, alumni, economic developers in your region who might have a stake in the college's work-based learning capacity as well to recruit jobs to the region, retain jobs in the region. And then regional national partners. Maybe you all have worked with New America in the past. Maybe you all have worked with ACCT in the past. Maybe you've worked with another organization there locally or nationally around work-based learning in the past. And you might want to ask them what they think your areas of strengths or areas of improvement might be. So the self-study tool, again, will include resources for that physical survey, the survey instrument, as well as these interview protocols in case you'd like to have focus groups and one-on-one conversations to augment the data you might get from a survey. We know response rates vary for those, so we'll include that in the self-study. The sixth question really addresses strategic plan for work-based learning. That's really the ultimate output at the college level from this project. So fundamentally, we'd like to get a sense of, based on what you know about your institution's work in work-based learning, what does your gut say as some possible examples for capacity building changes that might help your institution improve on or scale work-based learning opportunities across the college? So this might look like faculty or staff development for work-based learning. We need to upskill our faculty around how to construct quality internships, how to organize apprenticeships, how to work with intermediaries. Maybe the priority is around data infrastructure. We need a way to track which students go into work-based learning, which employers are involved, and what the outcomes are, or where the work-based learning programs sit across programs. Are they in non-credit? Are they in credit? Are they in degree-based? Are they in non-degree programs? What does that look like? Maybe you think that the key priority will be around improving the employer partnership infrastructure. Who's tending to employer mobilization for work-based learning at the institution. Related to that, you might prioritize staffing of work-based learning creation itself. How do you staff that position? How do you leverage federal, state, philanthropic, industry funding sources to enable that function to be fulfilled within the institution? And then, there's other areas that you might focus on, ranging from issuing credit for work-based learning opportunities or thinking about how work-based learning opportunities could stack on one another. Maybe the first experience is a project-based capstone, the second experience is a micro internship, and then the third experience is an internship that ultimately leads into a job for the student once they graduate. And then the final area in the application is just giving us a sense of how we can help. What are some areas for technical assistance? As you all carry out your self-study at your institution, you'll have this team, the new America ACCT team, available to help with literature scans, with whiteboarding solutions or strategizing, with thinking about policy barriers or opportunities that might help your work-based learning capacity building. So give us a sense of what some of the unknowns are. What would you like us to support you with as you're carrying out the self-study at your institution? So that is it from my end. And now I'm going to hand the mic to my colleague, Joyce, to take it from here.
Sure, thank you, Shaylin. And I know there are some questions that have come up in the chat earlier. Hopefully, a lot of those have been addressed as Shaylin and Steve have continued to go into the application a little bit more. But if there are um, lingering questions or follow-up questions you still have after that, please feel free to continue dropping them in the chat before our Q&A. But before we get to the Q&A, I'm going to talk through the last two sections of our application. Which Shaylin and Steve have both mentioned before, but this is meant to be more administrative, less so of an application per se, but the place where you will start to provide us some information for us to help us expedite the process of getting the members of our cohort grant funding and get some of those logistics out of the way. So in section 3 is where you'll submit to us some attachments that we're asking for and other financial information. Shaylin and Steve have both touched on this letter of support, which really gets at the second bullet of the selection criteria in terms of some demonstrated commitment from employer and regional industry partners in your community. So this is where you'll upload a letter of support that addresses the college's desire to improve work-based learning, and also, most importantly, that industry or employer partners' commitment to supporting the college in those efforts and really serving as a collaborative partner towards those goals. The next part of this section is a grant budget. So we'll ask for a very simple breakdown of your proposed budget for the funding. This application document you're looking at, you'll see that there is a link to a sample table or template that you can download as a reference, or you'll see under question 3 of this section, just a quick table that you can copy or use as a reference as you're pulling your budget together. And again, this budget is meant to be simple and straightforward. Shaylin and Steve have both mentioned that this is not a federal grant proposal by any means. So as much information as you're able to provide about the proposed uses of funding in your budget is helpful. But again, you can keep it simple and it might also be helpful for you all to know that that 20,000 in grant funding will be dispersed in 2 installments of 10,000 each. So if that's information that's helpful for you as you're putting together your budget, please keep that in mind. And also please keep in mind the eligible uses of funding that Steve had mentioned previously. And that is also available in the announcement article and blog that we linked in the chat earlier. And Steve mentioned this, but we do want to emphasize again that your proposed uses of funding in your budget will not be a factor in your selection or in reviewing your application. This is just for us to start gathering some necessary financial information on the front end, should you receive some funding down the road in the summer. And then alongside the budget, there will be not an upload, but a little brief text field for you to input a brief budget narrative just to explain some of the justification for the expenses included in your budget. And then for financial information, we'll just ask you to upload the W-9 form for your college, as well as your college's banking information, just again to expedite the process of dispersing the grant funding should you be selected. And within the form, this ACH information, banking information section is optional. So if you would prefer that our finance team reach out to you to get that information securely via DocuSign, that is also an option. You can indicate that in the form. And then the last section is, again, a place for you all to just indicate some windows of time that you're available between late May And in early June, should we need at that time, and this interview panel ideally would include not only the full team that completed the application, but also some representation from institutional leadership like a president or a CEO that would join you. Um, Once we receive your application with this availability, we'll reach out to finalize some times for you to interview with the new American ACCT teams. So we'll just ask that you block off some of these times in advance to expedite that scheduling process. And although the interview should last no more than an hour, just to make you sharing your availability with us easier, we have these 2 hour time blocks. But again, the interview should not last a full 2 hours. So if you could share that with us in the final section of your application, that would be helpful for us to make sure that we can kickstart the cohort and get you all your funds. Before I turn it over to a Q&A, I'll open it up to the rest of the new American ACCT teams if there's anything else that we might have missed or wanted to cover before we take some questions.
I think you covered it, Joyce. Let's
Perfect.
take a look at our questions here. I'll open up the chat. Right. So I'm going to just read off the questions as I see them here. Is your ideal cohort participant a school with advanced, widely recognized work-based learning capabilities, or a school? Okay, so this is a great question, and this is from Michael Morgenstern. So the question is, are we looking for colleges that are already savvy on work-based learning, or a school that is more emergent in work-based learning? I would say we're open to either. Ultimately, we'd like our self-study tool to be helpful for any college, regardless of the sophistication of their work-based learning infrastructure. But I would say that if you're an institution that has already gone through past work-based learning capacity building initiatives, we are not necessarily penalizing applicants for that. We see that as commitment to work-based learning capacity building, which is, a good qualifier on our end. At the same time, if the institution has demonstrated commitment to work-based learning, but it's just nascent in the infrastructure, that is also a prime candidate for the cohort. So I would say both are fair games for the cohort. Steve or team, anything you'd add to that?
No, I would agree because I think if you have an experienced institution, that's going to help inform the validity of the tool and help contribute to the tool. And um, I think that kind of feedback will be helpful for institutions that aren't quite as advanced.
I see. Can it be representative from my college's president's office and board, or that it has to be them? Julius, if you wouldn't mind maybe coming off mute and building on your question a bit here.
Yes, hi. Hi, Roman. My name is Jules Landrup. I'm the work-based learning coordinator at San Diego City College. So San Diego City College, we're part of a district, the San Diego Community College District, with four other sister college. Um, and one of those things is basically we have a chancellor and we have a board of trustee. So it's like um, the question is they're overseeing not just City College, but the other three sister college, a representative from them, and also is it allowed to have a representative from my president's office at City College, or it has to be them exactly?
Yeah, this is a good question. So if you're a district or a system representing multiple institutions, this particular cohort, we're looking for institutional representation, but we've actually gotten this question a lot. There are a lot of systems and districts that are interested in the self-study tool. We would love to hear from you because we'd like to see if there's a way to make, once the self-study tool is available for all colleges across the full ACCT membership, we'd love to see if there's ways that we can provide some dedicated support to the systems and districts. As far as this application goes, if you're planning on applying as an individual institution, we would look for the leadership of that individual college to be represented in the application. Does that answer the question?
Um, in regards to application, but let's say we're one of the recipients. Does my president have to be part of that group, or even though this is good clarification because it makes sense for me, my dean, because he's our workforce equivalent to workforce chief, but our president, the role of president is a lot. It's okay for him to have a designee, or my president needs to be the person there in that team.
Steve, I saw you came off mute. Did you want to add something to this?
I would just, I mean, I totally understand that presidents are quite busy. So I would say as long as the president is being kept in the loop, and please, Shaylin, correct me if you're thinking something differently, but I think a designee, a senior cabinet, individual that can speak on behalf of the president, I think would be appropriate as long as, the president's engaged in being communicated with and understands what's happening. So they're not in the dark.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, so another question I see here is, will the self-study be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed? It'll primarily be qualitative in nature. But that being said, what we will provide will really be a template for institutions to customize. So if you would like to ask more quantitative questions in your survey to stakeholders, we would encourage that. Ultimately, the self-study tool is meant to help colleges gain the insights they need to build a capacity building strategic plan. So if it's necessary or helpful to get some more quantitative data points in addition to the qualitative data points, then we will encourage cohort members to add their own mix of questions to the list. Yeah. Um, So another question here, what are some good examples of practice changes? So yeah, again, as we went over in the application, and I will maybe bring back the screen share just to illustrate here. So some examples of those practice changes that we would be looking for would be here in question 6 that you see. So you might focus on faculty development or staff development for work-based learning as an area of capacity building need. You might emphasize strengthening data tracking or data infrastructure for work-based learning. You might emphasize improving employer partnership structures, enhancing how advisory committees are run. Maybe you'd like to scale out the built model or the DACA model for work-based learning in particular. Maybe you'd like to standardize how your institution runs advisory committees. That's something we've seen across a couple of our past projects. Maybe you'd like to better triangulate how work-based learning is staffed at the institution, who's in charge of it, who is sort of evaluating on a continuous basis for the institution. Maybe you'd like to develop a fundraising strategy for work-based learning. And then of course there's that credit component as well. Steve, Joyce, or team, any other ideas or thought prompts that you'd add in terms of practice changes or capacity building priorities that colleges could be thinking about for this question? Yeah. Yep. So those are a little bit of the parameter of what we're looking for by way of the practice changes. And Joyce has put the link in the chat as well to our SurveyMonkey Apply application. Maybe I'll just, yeah, open up the floor. Does anyone have any other questions that we can answer about the application process, about the project more broadly? Feel free to come off mute, or you can pop your question in the chat here. These are some great questions, so thank you for those of you who've already chimed in. All right, hearing none. I think that'll call it wraps then for this overview webinar. Thank you all very much for joining. We're really excited to see your applications, and we're excited to work with many of you through our cohort, and then hopefully all of you when the self-study tool is eventually published for the full ACCT membership. Steve, I'll turn it over to you for closing.
Again, I just want to say thanks to everyone. Hopefully you found this information helpful. Again, this was recorded, so we will be sending out the link to the recording, I would say sometime tomorrow, or it will be available when it goes out. It'll go out to the group on this call tomorrow, but then it'll be sent out in a blog at a later date. So again, thanks and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.